Welcome to the Neutral Corner with Coach Jay and the Golden Boy. Hey everybody, welcome to the 5th episode of the Neutral Corner. I'm Coach Jay. Over here is my son, Andrew the Ottawa Valley Golden Boy. And as our very special guest tonight is Rob Ingram, otherwise known as McDojoLife. Hey Rob, how you doing?
Living the dream, brother. Living the dream.
That is fantastic. So for those of you who don't know who McDojoLife is, thank you, Andrew. For those of you who don't know, Rob has made it his mission to expose fake martial arts and fake instructors all over the internet, and I feel it has a very, very positive effect on the martial arts community as a whole and the combat sports community, where there's a lot of overlap between the martial arts and the combat sports community. So I told you in the beginning that we do a segment about boxing tidbit. So this is my every week I do a story. It's some sort of an interesting story, just a little tidbit, something that gives you information about your favorite fighters that maybe you didn't know. So this week the boxing tidbit is Sonny Liston. Thank you, Andrew. This week the tidbit is Sonny Liston. Everybody knows, anybody who's into boxing history, one of the hardest jabs in boxing history, one of the best jabs in boxing history. What a lot of people don't know is that he had that jab because he was a right-handed fighter, a right-handed person who trained left-handed person who trained right-handed, and that put his strong hand up front. So when he very first started training, he had that damaging jab. Well, the tidbit comes from, why did he train as a right-handed fighter when he was left-handed? Well, he learned, as many people know, he learned how to box in jail from a padre. That padre didn't know how to train left-handed fighters. That's the whole story. That Sonny Liston's original coach didn't know enough about boxing to be able to train a left-handed fighter. So he said, you are a right-handed fighter now. And unknowingly created one of the most powerful jabs in boxing history.
It's amazing. Yeah, I've heard of the term purposeful southpaw.
Yeah.
I'm very much a purposeful southpaw. So
are you?
Yeah, for sure. I think that it started from when I read the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. So if you ever read the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, he talks about put your strong hand in a weak position, put your weak hand in a strong position, and they should possibly even out, which is a solid idea. But I'm always about mirroring stance. So when I started learning, I started in karate. So we had to learn everything off of both sides, and everything had to be learned with both leads. So by the time I moved to boxing, I had that standard of, if I'm going to learn my jab on my right lead, I'm going to learn my jab on my left lead. And then that turned into a lot of the things that I learned in karate as carrying over into boxing. For instance, open stances and closed stances, mirroring leads. So if someone had their right foot or their left foot in front, I would put my right on purpose. That would get me to go to the exit off the back. And that way I wouldn't have to deal with the power hand or the power leg, especially when I went to kickboxing. So it was very handy over the years to be able to use both sides and never be stuck in one stance. And you'll see guys like Prince Hamed Nassim. Is that
Nassim,
how?
That's right. Yeah.
He was very much a free spirit when it came to boxing. It didn't really matter what lead he had in front because he was just kind of dancing his way through it. He just kind of felt it in the moment. So I think it's super important to do that. Learn both sides, learn both leads, learn how to do both sides very well. You're always going to have a stronger side, right? But at the end of the day, it's handy, especially if you're getting pieced up by somebody who's really good at fighting against orthodox fighters. Then all of a sudden you're like, well, let's change the audible here. Now I'm going to become orthodox, or now I'm going to become a southpaw and see what happens,
So I'm a very conservative coach. So while I agree with you 100%, I don't take that approach to new fighters. The way I describe it to new fighters, because everybody sees them on TV, everybody wants to be that switch hitter. The way I describe it to them, I give them a short example, like a thought experiment. If you and I both have 1,000 reps, and of course reps are how you get better. If you and I both have 1,000 reps, I spend 500 reps on southpaw, 500 reps on orthodox. You spend 1,000 reps on orthodox. Who's the better boxer? As beginning boxers.
Well, I mean, it depends on a lot of factors. Like if you look at somebody like Dan Inosanto, for instance, when Dan Inosanto talks about martial arts in general, and I consider pugilism one of the oldest forms of martial arts, which
Of
is
course.
why I always laugh at people when they say traditional martial arts are garbage. Because it's like, well, wrestling is a traditional martial arts, one of the oldest martial arts there is. What about boxing? It's one of the oldest martial arts there is. So no, traditional martial arts are not all nonsense. But the thought process is that everyone is born with attributes. And
Yes.
so some people are more aggressive, which is great. You can use that. Some people are just simply tough, right? Like the natural iron chin. Some people are really dumb. Some people are really intelligent. You're not going to try to you're not going to try to overcomplicate something, especially for somebody who might not be as intelligent. So you simplify that for that person. Whereas somebody who's more analytical, they'll understand it better if you describe it in that way. So I think depending on who you get, really depends on how you coach them. But I 100% agree with you. To start off, if you're painting on a solid canvas, the part that most people miss as coaches is you have to build the canvas. You're not going to paint on it yet. You have to frame it. You have to take the canvas and wrap it up. You have to give them parameters first, and then they could be more free once they learn their basics. Kind of like art. You know,
yes, absolutely.
You have your primary colors, right? That's what we're going to learn to paint with first. We're not going to learn about mixing them. We're not going to worry about theory. You're going to learn these 3 colors, and then we'll work outside of the box.
So I did a lot of traditional martial arts when I was younger as well, and I think that it's easier to be a switch hitter, so to speak, coming from the martial arts than it is the combat sports, because there's an immediate payment that you have to make in the form of getting your butt whipped. If you try and get too complicated too quickly. So I generally bring them along a little slower. It's a faster way to get in the ring. It's a faster way to get competent. Once you're competent, then like Andrew, for example, 6-7 fights in, he started shifting just for defense. He'd shift out of something into southpaw, back into orthodox, just to get away on the strong side. Now he has actually gotten to the point where we call it the Dempsey jab, because he'll do a Dempsey shift and then he'll come out of it with a right-handed jab. Every once in a while, now there's about 20 fights, he's now starting to fool with, maybe I'll throw a combination from southpaw. So we're taking it very slowly, but he became a 3-time provincial champion on being just unorthodox, and now he's starting to add. Now that he's competent in one, certainly the versatility of bringing the other one in has been huge. But I'm pretty conservative that way. So that's my thought on it. But yeah, it's absolutely a good thing if you can not sacrifice quality of training.
Yeah, I think it just takes time. Like, I think especially looking at pros, like there's a huge difference between a 20-0 pro and a 30-0 pro. It's like night and day difference, right? Yes. So so when there's a huge difference between an amateur and a guy who was pro. There's a huge difference between that, so every like 5 fights or so, you can start to tell like this big gap in between skill levels.
Absolutely.
And so, there are stages and there are levels to this. And it really isn't until you get like, I think maybe about 10 years in or so, that you really start to taste the spices. At first you're just tasting bland chicken, right? You're going to have all the basics. Nothing's going to get spicy. You're going to stick to the game plan so you don't get knocked unconscious, so you can make it to your 11th fight. Then once you get there, it's like, all right, well, now you understand what this is like. You can get rid of the intangibles, like the adrenaline dump, the head game that happens in the locker room, the moment when you're trying to have a conversation with the guy wrapping your hands, like all of these little stages people don't think about, but all of those are processes. And you have to do them a few times before you really get used to it, So I love
anybody. So for anybody who's listening, Rob's expertise is not just traditional martial arts. I did a little bit of my research there, Rob. You did 6 amateur boxing bouts?
Yes, sir. When I fought in a club when I was like really young. So I started my very first boxing matches in smokers. So I did smoker fights first. That was where I cut my teeth, and they were literally in a nightclub. It was 21 and up nightclub, and back then it was like very loose what the standards were in terms of what was allowed and what wasn't. Right. So I would go to this fight night, and I was 15, and the first guy I ever fought was 35.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, anybody could. We actually recorded all of them. I'm sure eventually I'll do a documentary about those times, because they really did change a lot of what the standards are in terms of rules and regulations back then. because it was not safe. But you know, so
I know in Canada, smokers are if you get caught by the PSO doing smokers, you'll have your qualification removed.
yeah, I mean, it's still pretty tight here now. It just wasn't then.
Right.
But you know, like they were legit smokers. I mean, the term smokers literally comes from the fact that people are smoking in the room. That's you know, so like there are literally people smoking cigars. Like I remember one fight, I think it was my third fight there, where I stepped back, and as I went to go step back, I put my foot in someone's drink because they on the ring. We did 2-on-2 fights, which I posted a 2-on-2 fight on my YouTube channel. It was
that's wild.
We did what was called Thunderdome rules, which was an agreement you made with another person. Which basically any rules really flew as long as you and the other person agreed to them. So Thunderdome rules was another one, which was 1 round, no time limit. It only stopped when someone quit or got knocked out.
Oh, jeez.
So it was a wild, man. It was wild, but that was how I cut my teeth. Was basically fighting drunks as a child in a bar, and then that moved on to like after I was 6-0 as an amateur. I was like, all right, well, I want to do kickboxing because I already had a strong competitive background in sport karate. Yeah. Then I did boxing, which is, you know, boxing and sport karate are night and day different in terms of your contact. And then I was like, well, I know how to kick and I know how to box. I was like, well, let me kickbox. This should make a lot of sense. And so I did kickboxing, and then I wound up going 4-0 as a kickboxer out of that smoker. Then I got picked up on an international kickboxing team. Nice. And I didn't ever count like those kickboxing matches because they were tournament style. So it was like 1, maybe 2 rounds, depending on the rule set. And then it was a tournament. So you had to fight like several times in that day. And that cut my teeth a lot with kickboxing. But then I was like, all right, well, let me try to see if I can do a couple like full contacts. And I had 2 losses back-to-back kickboxing. They were spinning back kicks, both losses, both liver shots. And if anybody's ever had a liver shot, basically what a liver shot feels like is it feels like you got hit by something and it's like, ow, well, that was annoying. But then it's delayed. So it's like 2 or 3 beats later, your entire body goes, oh, we're not going to function anymore. And you collapse in pain. Liver shots suck so bad. So those were my 2 losses in kickboxing. And then around that time, I was like, you know what? Like, I was already on the road. I was fighting every weekend in a tournament, literally for 2 years. On every weekend for 2 years was dedicated to a different tournament. So it would be like a local. Locals for us, for the team, was like us just like getting loose. Like it was like making us feel good, right? And then we would wreck house at a local, then we go to a state, and then we'd usually do very well in a state. Then we do a national and then an international. But that cycle happened for 2 years straight, and I just got burned out. I got tired of seeing cool new locations that I only saw the hotels of.
Right, yeah.
Canada, I got to see a Canadian hotel. I got to go to Mexico. I got to see a Mexican hotel. Like, it was all dedicated to fighting. And it was like I didn't get to experience anything during that time except for that. So after that,
it's funny. I have similar experience with the military. I've been all over the world with the military. A lot of places I've just been to the airport.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
I've been to the Japanese airport a couple times. Greece.
Yeah, but after that, I just started a gym. Then I became a striking coach. I got bought out. Then I became a striking coach, and then I've been doing business consulting and running McDojoLife now ever since.
Right. And that was something I didn't know about, that you did the business consulting. That was a neat thing for me. So I get our first question for you there. You want to bring that up, Andrew? So we see a lot of your videos. They're usually traditional martial arts because they have more, what do you want to call it, leeway for things, for the, I don't know how you want to define them. Like they think it's a supernatural power that they have access to, the no touch death strike and all the stuff that we see on your, but boxing gyms or kickboxing, combat sports gyms, can they be McDojos as well?
Absolutely. So people who follow the page know this, but people who just kind of glance at it might not. So I actually have 5 specific rules for what make a McDojo. Yeah, and those 5 rules are universal. Doesn't matter what art is being taught. And so this might surprise a lot of people. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'll make sure I glance over it so people know. But people misconstrue what a McDojo is. They think that a McDojo is only a school that is just out for your money. That's ridiculous. Almost nobody starts a martial arts school because they're in it for the money. Why? Because most people have no clue how to make money in martial arts. So I can tell you that's usually 9 times out of 10 not the case. Also, price is subjective. If you can afford it, you can afford it. And if you can't, you can't. What the value of that is depends on the individuals. What is worth that much money for them? You know, if you're a millionaire, you might toss like $200 a month down a gym membership, never show up and not care. But that's because you can afford it. So cost is subjective. But at the end of the day, there are 5 standard rules that I have that are universal. 1, pedophiles. So the thing about martial arts in general is it's kind of the wild, wild west. You don't really need any credentials whatsoever to start any kind of martial arts school, including a boxing gym. It doesn't take a genius to go, I can punch faces, and then lie to people about being able to do that, and then take advantage of them. All you have to do is be charismatic. But because it's unregulated, and because anybody can open up a gym with no true standard, there are pedophiles all over the place, even in boxing, even in Muay Thai, even in Jiu-Jitsu. It doesn't matter because there is no standard to open a school. And there's nobody going to knock on your door checking on you to see if you're on the up and up. You just get away with it until you don't.
I have to say I'm surprised by your number 1. I didn't expect that.
Most people don't. Well, the thing is that most people in the martial arts industry, no matter what, combat sports industry, period, we think and we argue about the most petty, stupid things while we ignore the major glaring ones. People will point a finger at the gym across the street and go, that's a McDojo, this giveaway belts. All right, well, like, what's your standard? I mean, just because, like, what is your standard of good? Because there's always someone better than you. Right. So if the standard is they have to be good, a good compared to who? Like, just because you're the best in your city doesn't mean you're the best in your state. Just because you're the best in your state does not mean you're the best in the 4 states around you. Yeah. You just are. So, okay, well, that's a dumb standard. Skill is not a good standard to hold. Why? Because at the end of the day, what about people who have cerebral palsy? Do they not count? Oh, well, they have well, then at that point, if you're not going to say that they're not included in that, then guess what? That's not a standard. That's a rough guideline of someone who's convoluted, who's only listened to other people complain. What about someone who had a stroke and they show up every day and they bust their ass? That person had to work 10 times harder than you just to get in the door. Yeah. And then they have to put themselves through hell just to try to get their gloves on. And then on top of that, they have to work even harder around able-bodied people. And then they have to try to hit the bag in a way that they know their body cannot possibly do it, but they try anyway. Right. So are we going to say that because that person isn't skilled, that they don't deserve to have a nod of approval? I disagree. I think that people who have disabilities should have a standard. And if that is the case, then skill is subjective. It doesn't matter. Our job as coaches is simply to make our students reach their goals. That's it. So, but the reason I brought all that up is because people will complain about that stuff, right? Oh, they're not very good. Oh, they just give away belts. Oh, they charge too much. That's all petty, ridiculous, stupid nonsense. But they'll ignore the fact that there's a pedophile every week that I cover a story about. They'll never share that up. They'll never talk about it. They'll never mention it because they're too busy complaining about the wrong things, which in turn destroys our industry. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 goes a lot more into boxing gyms, which is lying about your belt rank or your fight record. So a lot of people, when you first go to a gym, they don't know what questions to ask. The only question they really know to ask is, what is your resume? Like, what are your qualifications to be a coach? And how much does it cost? That's it. Past that, they don't know to ask anything else. So if you're going to tell them a lie within the first 5 minutes of meeting them, right, then you'll probably lie about everything else that has to do with your training.
Yeah.
Rule number 3 is unsafe training practices and cult-like behavior. So unsafe training practices are like you'll see a lot more in the Middle East, where you'll have students standing in a row. They'll have their hands behind their back and their coach teeing off on their head, punching them in the head. Yeah. That doesn't make you better at anything other than being submissive to your coach, who's clearly a cult leader who is going to destroy your boxing career.
Yes.
The goal of boxing, by the way, is to not get hit. I don't know if anybody knows that or not, but your goal is to hit the other guy and not get hit. Yeah. So if you're practicing getting hit a lot, there's something wrong. Like, get out of the way.
We
So
say it all the time. You've only got a certain number of hits you can take to the noodle. Don't spend them all in training.
exactly, man. And the thing is like when it comes to that particular training, that's simply because people, it's like, I do see this the majority in the Middle East. I don't know where this training method came from, but you don't see a lot of those guys wind up becoming world champions, probably for that reason. Like they, it's like a health meter in a video game, and you just keep getting hit, and it just keeps ticking down. Once you get knocked out one time, it's like your brain realizes it's an option. It's like your brain didn't know that all the way up until you got knocked out. Then it's like, oh, wait, if I just shut off, then you'll stop hitting me. Well, so,
That's true.
but the cult like behavior you'll see in almost any gym, it's more ego of the coach. Most of the time, the cult like behavior, most of the time, it does get way worse. But the standard is usually, oh, you can't go train at any other gym but my gym.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah.
How about this? How about let's apply that to absolutely any other service that I'm paying for? If I go to my barber or salon, if you're
Yeah.
down there, maybe you got it like that. But if I go to my barber and I go and sit down, I was like, hey, dude, I was over at this like hair convention the other day and I got my hair cut, and the barber was like, get out of my chair. You can never be here again. We would all laugh at that because that's ass. Would you do that with your plumber? Your plumber doesn't give a shit. Your mechanic doesn't give a shit. You know who else doesn't care? No one in the history of ever, except for martial arts instructors, care if you forget the service from someone else. As long as you come back to them, they're happy to have you again. You know, like if I use 5 plumbers other than the plumber I have, and I came back to the original one, and I said, yo, man, I used 5 other plumbers. They all sucked. You're the best. That guy would be like, cool. He wouldn't be like, oh, you used 5 other plumbers. Get out of here. That's ridiculous. So that's cult-like behavior. You know,
it's funny. I find there's a lot of that in the jiu-jitsu world, where you'll have to I actually had to sign something at a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu school that said I agree not only not to train at other schools, but not to show the techniques that I'd learned to anybody else.
That's dumb.
And I know as a boxing coach, I know that there are clubs all over Ontario that don't like working with other clubs. They don't want their guys to cross train. I want my guys to cross train. If Andrew can go cross train with somebody else and get better, go to it. That's like you said, that's my job, is to help him meet his goal. If you can do that, train with me, you can get another piece over there. Go get that piece.
Most good coaches that I've ever run into usually have about the same lingo, which is, hey, you're going to go to that seminar? Awesome. When you come back, like to class on Monday, just like give us a piece of that info. That's it. Like, why do I care that you went somewhere else? That's where that cult mentality is. And again, that really does go into that, like, people being bad at business, is because if you're good at business, let's say hypothetically, I had one student do that and they left. Well, statistically, the average student leaves within a year anyway. So if I'm good at my job, I will have more students coming in. The loyal ones will stay. And if I provide a nurturing atmosphere that is conducive to them reaching their goals, then I'm a good coach. That will beat 90% of other coaches who only think about themselves. Right. Like, I don't need to stop you from doing what you want. That's like an abusive, like, boyfriend, you know? How dare you look at these other dudes? You're not going to stay with me? What if she doesn't? Who cares? Bye? Like, sayonara.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Like, then maybe she wasn't for you, brother. So, like, it is what it is. But the next one is shady business practices. Now, this is where people misconstrue the pricing structure. They think that someone charging too much is a problem. If I charge you $1 million a month and I look you in the eye and I say, you know what, I've only been doing this for a week. I'm not really good. I'm pretty sure I'm going to teach you absolutely the wrong thing to do. But I'm going to charge you $1 million a month and you still pay for it. I was honest to you. That's on you as a consumer at that point. The hard part is when they lie to you and they give you like an upfront fee. And then all of a sudden, there are all these extra fees that get tacked on that you did not expect. There's all this extra equipment you did not expect. And I'll give you an even crazier example. I had a guy that was local here in town, and that person used to strong arm people for money. So if they did not pay up on time, he literally went to their houses and threatened them physically if they did
Oh
not
my
pay.
God.
So like that's a shady business practice. So like I think half that battle is literally just being honest with your student. Like you can charge and do almost whatever you want to charge and do as long as you're upfront about it. Then it's not shady. Shade, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know what the term shady means, is that there's a dark area you didn't see. Like if you're up front, there's no shade. You can see completely fine all the way around the tree. And then the last one, rule number 5, is no touch knockouts, which obviously you're not going to see a lot in a boxing gym. But the second part of that, which is mislabeling technique, you will see that. For instance, if I go to a cardio kickboxing class and they try to convince me that I'm going to be a world kickboxing champion, they're lying to you. You go to a kickboxing gym and they tell you you can become a kickboxer, but they've never actually put you through any mitt work. They've never actually had you test the technique, and they put you in the ring. That's dangerous to you. Like you need to have a little bit of sparring, and it doesn't have to be hard. It just has to have the understanding of like, this is what it's like to have a punch come at you. This is what it feels like to be hit. Like, and usually when I teach people, I always look for the same 5 things, which is, are they holding their breath? Are they closing their eyes when they're throwing a punch? Are they trying to actually hit me in the face? Because most people right off the bat, if anybody doesn't know, will not actually try to hit you in the face. They'll punch you in the shoulder, they'll punch you in the body. They won't even hit you at all. So these little things are things that you have to break as a coach. You have to like, hey, we got to fix a couple of these things. But if I didn't try to break you of that and I go, man, you're doing a good job, I'm doing you a disservice.
Right.
Yeah. So mislabeling techniques is something that happens all over the place. You need to be honest with your student because this is a combat sport, and that means that they will be in combat. And if they try to use your techniques in combat, they damn sure better work because that might be the last time they're ever in combat. So those are the 5 rules. Whenever I brought those up, I've never had any objection to those rules. So far in the last decade of doing this, they've stuck and tried true. So those are the 5 rules of what a McDojo are.
No, very good. So the next one, you want to pop that up there, Andrew?
Yep.
So why would you say that McDojos are dangerous?
I think that they're dangerous for all the rules I just gave you. Like, for instance, I'll just go down the list one more time. Clearly, if somebody does not require their staff to be locally and federally background checked, that's a breeding ground for having criminals teach and being around not just adults, but also children. Yeah. That is highly dangerous. Or let's say, hypothetically, we didn't do a background check on Coach Steve. Then Coach Steve seems like such a nice guy, but he has a history of being physical and violent with other people. What do you think is eventually going to happen when he has a student in the boxing ring with him and he's sparring and he gets mad? He might actually injure that student on purpose. Also extremely dangerous. Lying about your belt rank and your fight record is not as harmful, but what happens is if they're willing to lie about that, they'll probably lie about techniques they teach you.
Sure.
And that means that you're probably learning subpar things to defend yourself. You might have to rely on those to defend yourself, whether it be in sport or in real life. And if they fail you, you could die. So it's kind of important to know what you're doing.
Right.
Cult-like behavior, I've seen it all the time. I've seen things like rape, extortion. I've seen gang rape. I've seen students get shot. I've seen, what else? For instance, things like a gauntlet in jiu-jitsu, which is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. For anybody who doesn't know what a gauntlet is in jiu-jitsu, it's something where somebody gets belt promoted, and once they receive their belt promotion, students line up on the left side and the right side, creating like an aisle. And then you have to walk down that aisle, and they whip you with belts. Please tell me what the benefit of that is.
I don't know. I've been there. I've done that. So I absolutely have seen that.
All that is just getting you used to abuse. And then once I can make you do stupid things like that, I can make you do things like work for me for free. I can do things like tell you this is good for you when it's not. How does that help you? It doesn't make you tough. You should have been made tough by the jiu-jitsu. If I have to do that to get tough, why am I paying you for the jiu-jitsu? I can get whipped by people for free. And obviously the unsafe training practices like that, getting a coach who's just teeing off in your head. could cause permanent brain damage. Another example of unsafe training practices was there was a boy in Taiwan a year ago. This boy was his second judo class ever. Second ever. Keep that in mind. The boy was about 8 years old.
Oh,
He
goodness,
was
okay.
showing signs of being ill at first. He said, I'm not feeling well. I don't want to do this. Now, the coach was like, you know what? You're complaining too much. Don't be a baby. We're going to continue to do this. So he kept throwing him. And then after that, he started showing signs of a concussion. He said he was nauseous. He threw up. He said he had blurred vision. He said he had a headache. All of these things are signs of a concussion.
Right.
The coach was like, you're just being a baby. And then he made all the students throw that child. All of those students, by the way, were also children. He was thrown so many times, he was literally put into a coma.
Oh, my God.
While his uncle watched. 3 months while being in a coma, he never comes out of a coma, he passes away.
Oh, my God.
This is that tough love bullshit that people try to sell. That's not going to make you tough. What that's going to do is going to get you indoctrinated to being abused, and you'll be used to abuse, and you'll accept it as so. That's not going to make you better, and as a matter of fact, it will get you killed. The shady business practices, not as dangerous, but financially can put you in destitute if you're not paying attention. And then finally, mislabeling techniques absolutely can get you killed, because a false sense of confidence is a crazy thing. Anybody who's ever done any major drug before will know that when you get that false sense of confidence, you think you could do crazy things like fly, or I can lift a bus, or whatever you're on when you're doing. So like what happens is you get this false sense of security, and then you have the confidence, which is good, but what you don't have is the skill to back it up. And that's where you get hurt.
So I just wanted to expound on something you had said. So we'll get into this a little later on a different topic as well. But any NCCP, which is the Canadian National Canadian Certification Program, or USA Boxing, those are the two that I'm most familiar with. If you have one of the levels or one of the colors in the States of actual coaching certification, you have had a background check, so that they're protecting them against criminal behavior, pedophilia, the sex registry. So if they're actually qualified coaches, they've had all those. Even my son.
Yeah, I have it.
He's 19 years old, and he's had to do it for the past couple of years.
Good. As it should be.
As it should be. Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And overseas, I think Britain, I do believe they have a safe sport certification that you have to go through.
Yeah,
we have it here too. Yeah.
Awesome, which is a great thing, and it really does weed out a lot. It doesn't weed out everybody, because something that people forget is like being put on a sex offender registry doesn't necessarily mean you're put on there for life. And so there are a lot of people who have taken plea deals. For instance, there's a guy named David Arnbeck, and David Arnbeck molested a 15-year-old girl in his home. He pled guilty to molesting a 15-year-old girl in his home, and because of that, he wasn't even required to be put on a sex offender registry. Which, by the way, would mean that technically through the safe sport background check, that might not necessarily pop up. So, I mean, so it's something to keep in mind, is that just because somebody has had some type of clear background check, that might just mean that whatever they did do has been expunged off their record, because whether they served their time or whether they weren't put on there at all because of a plea deal. But it is super handy to have.
Wow, I didn't know that, actually. So this is going to lead into the next question for you there, Rob. Yeah, sorry, buddy. What's the worst thing that you've seen in some of these videos that get sent to you?
Well, obviously not everything that gets sent to me is what I can post.
Of course.
There are
and I read a post. You wrote a post like that on one of your Instagram posts. So that's actually specifically what I'm referencing.
So there's been quite a few that I've seen over the years that are pretty heavy. I did mention to you the gang rape thing. So somebody who does what I do in Bali, and so Bali is like in Indonesia, that's like a hot spot for nonsense. And so they believe in things like tenaga dalam, which means inner power. They believe that they can knock people out by like not touching them or move them with their mind. They believe in something called dibas. Dibas is a ritual of self-mutilation without harm. So you'll see them like take razor blades and cut their face, and they'll be bleeding all over the place, and they'll wipe their face and there's no cut, because it's a magic trick.
Yeah.
But they'll do that with like chainsaws. They'll do that with like machetes. They'll have big rituals too. It's not just like one person doing it. It's like 50 or 60 people all in like a field surrounded by people watching, and they're all cutting themselves and bleeding everywhere. It's very odd. But in Bali, there's a guy who does what I do. It was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe. It was like anywhere between 11 to 1. It's been a while since that's happened. But he sent me a video, and he didn't say anything. He just sent me a video. And on Instagram, it's like one of those private videos. So it wasn't like I didn't know what it was. And he just said, you should watch this. So I like clicked on it. And when I watched it, it was literally a gang rape. And it was all people wearing like certain martial arts shirts. And they were all from the same school. And basically what they did, they were between the ages of like what seemed to be 12 all the way to like 19, 20 or so. And they went to a local bar. They found a woman who was like passed out drunk. They brought her back and they gang raped her right there in the kitchen. They put kitchen utensils inside this woman. She's bleeding all over the place. So when I got sent that video, needless to say, I wasn't exactly excited to see it.
Of course.
Like, dude, why would you send that to me? And he was like, dude, you got to do something about this. Like, this is like a whole group of people from the same school. So I was like, all right, well, I'll do the best I can. Clearly, I can't post that on Instagram, but I was able to take like screenshots in such a way that didn't really show too much, but I can kind of explain and I could allude. So I put those in my story, and I was able to find that kid. Like, people who followed the page were able to track down the kid at an ice cream parlor outside the ice cream parlor, like on a bench. And he was eating ice cream, and someone put like a camera in his face and was like, yo, did you do this? And got him to confess twice that it was not consensual. His mother, as I was like posting all these things in the stories, trying to call this kid out because I was able to find his Instagram, all that stuff. His mother contacted me directly, and his mother is extremely well-to-do. And she was like, my boy didn't do anything wrong. You got this wrong. I was like, did you watch the video? I was like, this was clearly rape. She was like, it was consensual. I was like, you can think what you want, man. It's one of those cases of my baby's never done anything wrong.
Right.
Yeah. And so I was like, I'm not stopping. So come to find out, like, it was like a week into this, she and the son went into the police station and came out, but no charges were ever filed against him. So we are under the impression that she probably paid the police because of the type of police situation that's over there. So like, that was infuriating. I saw an 8-year-old child slit his throat one time and kill himself because of the thing we talked about, Debus. He didn't know it was a magic trick because they're indoctrinated at such a young age to believe that this is real. They're fooled that this is real. Didn't know, picked up a real machete and killed himself because he thought he couldn't be harmed because he was convinced by the adults that he couldn't be harmed. There was a video. We even have this video in our trailer for our documentary, which is up on YouTube. But the video is of teenagers. They're roughly between the ages of like 10 to like 14, and they're all laying on their stomach side by side. And then the camera's like zoomed into them. It pans back and you can see like thousands of people watching. Then it pans back a little more and you see like one of those ramps that you would use to get like a truck up onto like a bike up onto a truck bed. And then it pans back even more and you see a truck there. And the truck goes up onto the ramp and it lands on the first kid because the ramp is so tall and the kid's so low that it just lands on him. And it kills the kid. It runs over the second kid. Oh,
are we still there?
He froze for a minute.
Oh, we've got a technical difficulty.
I'll pause the timer. I have a timer going on my phone. So
do you?
Okay, we're back.
There we go. We're back.
There we go.
All right, let's continue.
Sorry about that. So
no worries.
Back to where we were. So there's the truck ramp. The truck goes up onto the ramp. It lands on the first kid, kills him immediately. It drives over the second kid and it stalls. So the guy's trying to get the truck to start again, and he can't. And you can see the kid's legs twitching. Third kid sees what's going on. He moves out of the way. The truck starts and he runs over the rest, and the rest don't get hurt because the idea is you're supposed to run over them. And since they're on a soft surface, kind of pushes them down a little bit.
Right.
For the momentum of the truck to go forward. So it's, again, a trick. But the first kid was dead. And the second kid, it took them a while to revive that child, but they finally did. But, I mean, imagine being so brainwashed into nonsense that you are willing to literally watch this happen and do nothing to stop it because you truly believe that these kids have some type of magical inner power that they don't have. So those are probably some of the most horrific things I've seen. I know that's probably not what people expected, but I mean, I do a case about pedophilia probably once a week. I
That's
do.
unbelievable.
I've seen cases of like an instructor who shot a student doing gun disarms with live ammunition and still to this day
What?
continues to do so. His name's Edon Abelnik, and he runs a system called the Kala system. And he does some of the most abusive, ridiculous training, all in the name of God. And that's how he kind of gets away from it,
Right.
gets away with it. So, I mean, it's not necessarily the most fun job in the world, even though I try to make it funny because it's
Right.
more palatable that way. It's easier for people to digest and listen and talk when it's funny. When you start talking about the seriousness of that, most people don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So they just look at the videos, they laugh at it, they move on with their day. They forget these are victims.
Well, it's funny because I fell prey to a little bit of that myself. My background is I'm a close quarter combat instructor. Well, I was with the military for 20 years as well. So your good friend Detroit Urban Tactical, I say that with sarcasm, of course. He's one of the ones that I guess triggers me because there's just enough truth in what he says to lend the nonsense that he's teaching credence. Just enough.
I mean, there's so many ridiculous.
And I think militaries, like I know there are guys, close quarter combat instructors in the military, that when they're looking like, what am I going to teach tomorrow? And they'll go to this guy and like, yeah, that's what I'll teach. Like, this is crazy. He's actually influencing national military tactics, which is unbelievable to me.
I mean, the funny thing about Dale is Dale loves Dale more than anyone else on the planet loves themselves. I mean, I thought Kanye West loved himself, but Dale Brown, he takes the cake. He literally said in an interview with Colin Noir that if Chris Kyle would have taken Dale Brown's course, Chris Kyle would be alive today. If anybody knows the story of Chris Kyle was literally helping out veterans who were getting over PTSD, and he was taking them to gun ranges and teaching them how to shoot. I don't give a damn what training you had. Chris Kyle was going to die that day, and that's a shame, but that was some psycho who knew in their mind that was going to happen. Dale Brown was not going to save that guy's life, and Dale Brown wouldn't have saved his own life if that was the case either. Dale Brown also has a lot of contradictory information. One of the things that he talks about is not keeping around in the chamber. He talks about racking around before taking a shot. But literally watch any of his videos where he himself pulls out a gun. He never racks it before he shoots. He always just pulls and shoots. So that means he's contradicting his own bullshit.
Right.
And people don't pay attention. I'll give you another example. Hold on. I got my friend Mr. Glock over here.
Nice.
All right. Just so that way people at home don't heckle me. All right, we're good. We're good. All right, here. All right, so he has this thing where he talks about like, all right, well, don't leave a round in the chamber. All right, so let me walk through taking Dale Brown's advice. I don't have a round in the chamber, and I'm pointing my firearm at you. As I'm pointing my firearm at you, one of the other things that he talks about is taking the gun out of battery. So he talks about the gun is pointing at his chest. I'm not going to point my gun at myself. The gun's pointing at his chest, and he grabs the slide and he pushes it forward to take it out of battery, right? Well, let's go through his advice, right? So listen to the gun. Nothing, right? So there's no round in the chamber. I'm listening to his advice.
I know exactly where you're going with it.
And then all of a sudden he pushes that forward. What is my natural response going to be?
Pull it away.
Now what? He loaded a bullet for me. So it blows my mind how he can give so much contradictory information and people just eat it up because he's charismatic. He also loves to filibuster. If anybody out there ever like actually listens to any of his interviews, anytime he gets a very direct yes or no question or a question that requires him to give a very specific answer, he will talk around it and talk over it and talk over it and talk over it until people forgot what they asked him. They'll just let him do that. So like Dale's a clown. He's a ridiculous clown. Me and him have personal issues as well. But at the end of the day, Dale's a huge turd of a human being. By the way, how funny is the video where the guy is in the back seat and he tries to pen the gun with his tricep, and then he's like, "Oh, now I got the gun," and he's being dead serious. Like, come on, never gonna happen.
What I did notice is I think on the exact video you're talking about, where another close quarter combat instructor actually breaks down his technique. He's got it. And he pulls it out of train, and what was I? Oh, I remember what it was. The instructor was saying, rightfully so, everything that he did was 100% correct according to close quarter combat standards. But what is his name? Dale? Is that?
Yes.
What he misses, and it's amazing to me because it fits so closely with what you're saying about him, is one of the most important parts of CQC, especially for like weapons disarming, especially for firearm disarming, is taking it by surprise. You're not fast enough. You're not fast enough to get a hold of that weapon before you can fire it. So you got to get your hands up. You've got to, if you can cry and slobber on yourself, awesome. The more you can look like a pathetic human being, please don't kill me, I've got family, the better. But he doesn't want to do that because it makes him look bad.
Well, I mean, he's also been called out so many times for that nonsense. Like, there's a gentleman named Kenji, and Kenji actually went to his facility and did that disarm where Kenji's got the firearm pointed at him, and he goes to reach for it. Kenji pulls back and starts pulling the trigger, winds up shooting him 6 times. Yep. And then his response, which makes him one of the biggest piece of shit human beings on the planet, is that he winds up saying, all right, well, you know, he did that, okay, but look at me dragging Kenji around the floor and him crying about it. And all it was Kenji was offering himself to be used as a demonstration. He gave him the arm, allowed him to practice the technique, and then he tried to wrench on it to hurt him on purpose because he just got clowned. And it's like anyone who's willing to hurt a student on purpose because their pride or their ego is hurt is a terrible human being and shouldn't be allowed to teach.
No, and it's a big thing as well. And now some of these things, maybe it's minutia because I was an instructor for so many years doing this, but it bothers me when people are dealing with weapon disarms and they don't give you the caveat right up front. This is not, you can be the best person in the world at this technique. It doesn't guarantee you're going to survive this encounter. All these weapons disarms and being able to take the weapon and turn it back on you, all those things are tools in your toolbox that give you the best chance of survival. It doesn't guarantee anything. You are you are in the wrong room. Things are not going well for you. This is the best way to get out of that room. Maybe you're not getting out.
Situation dictates technique. Whatever situation you're in will tell you what technique you need to use. And there are only so many tools you can have in your toolbox. I mean, my toolbox, like, it's just like any of us, right? Our toolbox is only this big. If we try to cram every tool in that toolbox, you're never going to be able to close it. So that means you're not going to be able to retain all that information. What you need is X amount of things that are tried and true that you can drill over and over and over and over and over again and be efficient at those things. And so when you try to do ridiculous things like, oh, there's someone in your back seat and you're going to turn and you're going to pin the gun with your tricep. No, you're not. You're not going to do that. There are no fingers on your tricep. They will pull back, they will shoot you, or they will at least hit you with the gun. I know I would. If I'm, I'm like, why are you doing that? Fucking stop. All right, well, now get back to driver. I'm going to shoot you in the leg. Like, stop. It's I don't know. It's just absolutely asinine. What I regret, the only thing I regret is I never tag people that I post. I always do big stories on them on my YouTube. I typically don't tag them on social. And I do that for a lot of different reasons. But the one time I tagged him on the Instagram, I tagged him on my TikTok. And when I tagged it on TikTok, that particular video that I tagged him in got 17 million views. And launched it into the stratosphere. And I was like, I kind of regret it a little bit because, like, it's ridiculous. But anyone who's willing to actually listen to Dale and treat him seriously, I got to tell you, like, at this point, you're not a victim. At this point, you're a moron. Like, don't listen to the idiot. Like he wears a headpiece every time I see him teach anything.
I know,
like,
right?
Why would you wear a headpiece? Like, do you not plan on getting physical? He like hates MMA, and now he needs all the attention from MMA people. He's got to have the attention from MMA people because it makes him legit. Like, get out of here. His people don't spar, so how do you know that anything you're doing is effective with no pressure testing? He's
Yeah.
against sparring, actually. So,
Oh, well, that tells you just about everything you need to know. Want to go to the next one there, buddy? So we asked this of everybody, but because you're a unique case, you've got a background in a few different martial arts. You can pick a martial artist if you like, but who's your favorite fighter from current and past?
oh man. Well, it says boxer there too. Um, I like Willie Pep. I like.
Oh, you're my favorite already.
Um, I don't know to like. I think that if anybody doesn't know who that is, you should look him up. There's so much good. Like it was almost like he himself reminded me of like a blank canvas, and he painted his own masterpiece from his footwork to his timing to the way that he would utilize his cross in a different way than most people would. I love Willie Pep, but also I'm a big Roy Jones Jr. fan because when I was coming
Me
up
too.
the ranks, I got Roy Jones was a big name when I was younger, and he did a lot of techniques that I actually took. So I'd like watch him and then I go and apply them. So like for instance, I still to this day use something I got from Roy Jones just watching him fight, which was a high jab, low jab. But when he do his low jab, he went to a deep squat. And so what that would do is it would draw the attention of the eyes low, and which would automatically draw the hands down, and they would throw this big overhand right. And he would just catch people all the time, just boom, boom, bam, and he would just drop people all the time with that one. So I loved that one.
We actually teach that quite a bit, and I got that directly. You're right, from Roy Jones Jr.
He
I
also
think
had a
Willie Pep,
really good jab because you were talking about jabs earlier. He had a good jab too.
he had a
Um,
good everything. He might be, while he doesn't top anybody's list of greatest of all time. He certainly is physically, I believe, the most talented boxer of all time, and I put him up there with Mike Tyson as one of the most. It was probably the most exciting boxer of all time.
I
He
loved
always
watching
sitting in
him
the.
fight Tyson. I thought
Oh,
him fighting Tyson was amazing. Like,
that was fun. I enjoyed it.
and then when it comes to martial arts, like I have a few I think Dan Inosanto is an absolute genius. I think
Legend.
that's probably one of the most like legendary figures in martial arts besides Bruce Lee. I don't think he gets enough credit because obviously what people forget is like Dan Inosanto and Bruce Lee worked together. And then
Yes.
while Bruce Lee was out doing movies, Bruce Lee wasn't teaching all the time. Dan Inosanto was teaching all the time.
Yeah.
So I love his outlook on martial arts. I love the fact that he's just a student, perpetually a student, always learning something new. I respect that. I think that's incredible. And
I had
then
the honor of training with him when I was not too much older than you, Andrew.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I trained with him knife work. He did a knife work seminar at the dojo that I was training with at the time, at the Aikido dojo, which I've since learned some things about. But yeah, it was one of the biggest honors of my life. Even at the time, I knew what a big deal that was to train with him. Absolute legend. Couldn't agree with you more.
yeah, I got one more, and I got a little story about Dan Inosanto, but
Nice.
I also trained with him when I was younger too, which was great. He used to come in and do seminars all the time. Actually, his entire all of his students would too. Like so, it was Dan Inosanto, Rick Tucci, Paul Vunak,
Yeah.
and a couple others over the years. But they would come in and teach seminars at our facility. But when it comes to martial artists, I also like old school guys that aren't necessarily in the limelight now. I love Miyamoto Musashi. I think
Oh, absolutely.
uh, this was a guy who literally went from town to town. He was homeless and fought the best fighters in the area, and he killed them. And then he moved on to the next one because if you lost, you were probably going to die,
Right.
making him probably one of the greatest sword fighters of all time, if not the greatest of all time.
Well, they
Um,
consider him their sword saint, right? So
I mean, it's incredible what that guy was able to do, and I like read stories upon stories. Obviously, I'm sure some of those are a little convoluted, but like the story of him killing the greatest swordsman ever with a boat oar was great. Um,
yes.
he shows up late on purpose. He carved the
Kojiro.
yeah, man, he
That
carved
was
the
his name,
boat
was
oar.
Kojiro.
Then like the dude like got pissed off so mad he met him on the shore, which was really dumb. He was hiding the boat oar in the water. Guy says something. And he's like, you're already dead. And he cracks him over the head with a boat oar and beats him to death with it. Then he just gets back in the boat and rows away like it was just a Tuesday.
So, do you know why he told him you're already dead?
I mean, I'm assuming because he already knew he was going to kill him.
The interesting part of this, because this is a story I knew from childhood as well. I'm a huge fan of Musashi, and the opponent's name was Kojiro. When Kojiro showed up, and you're right, he showed up late, rode onto the shore late, and he was so mad, he drew his sword and charged him onto the beach. The moment that he drew his sword, he threw his scabbard away, and he said, "You're already dead because you've thrown your future away."
I mean, he cracked him in the head and killed him with a boat oar. I think
and
that's
then he
awesome.
killed him with a boat oar, yeah. And telling him that the philosophical thing behind it was that you've unsheathed your weapon and you've thrown away where you're going to put it afterwards, so you have no expectation in putting it away. You're already dead.
I mean, he definitely was already dead because he didn't make it off that beach. Not alive anyway.
No, that's exactly right. Next one.
Yeah, those are some of my favorites.
So, actually, I'm going to go back here. So for me, obviously, Willie Pep is one of my very favorites. Ali, because of his the way he affected the sport for decades and decades to come. And current for martial artists, I'm probably a big fan of Ryan Hall, just because he's so unorthodox.
Yeah, dude. Ryan Hall, like, he's one of those dudes that just looks so unassuming to so many people, but he can just choke your leg right off your body.
Yeah, it's funny. You're 100% correct about that. So what we generally do after our little conversation here is we go to a couple of things of boxing news.
I would just like to interrupt real quick.
Go ahead.
We have 5 minutes left.
I see it.
Okay.
We can go over by a couple of minutes here, but yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So these are just things that... so Anthony Joshua admits that success has taken a toll on his career. People are asking, is he done now after only a couple of losses, which always annoys me because I think that the whole Mayweather effect where you have to be undefeated is ridiculous. But he has admitted now that the distractions outside the ring have taken a toll. Goes right back to what Marvin Hagler used to say, hard to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do your run when you're waking up on silk sheets.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, look at just to mix the martial arts world with the boxing world. Look at somebody like Gordon Ryan. Gordon Ryan is legitimately, at this point, probably solidified himself as the greatest, if not one of the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioners of all time. And the way he does that is he could afford the sheets, but he sleeps on the dojo floor.
Right.
So, like, he has shown pictures and videos of himself in training camps, and he does not sleep at his house during those training camps. He sleeps in the dojo because he knows that in order to be able to continue to grow the way he needs to grow, at the pace he is still growing, that he needs to make sure that he's hungry. And, you know, like, you can't keep feeding your mouth if you want to be hungry. You got to take the time and take away all those distractions. So I think that if Anthony Joshua really wanted the success not to take effect, then he has the option not to. I mean, Gordon Ryan and himself shows his pay stubs, his monthly pay stubs that are almost in the millions of dollars. Like, I mean, his DVD or his instructionals alone are banking him like six figures, like every time he shows a paycheck.
Oh, wow.
That's not including his endorsements. That's not including what he's getting paid to show up to teach seminars. That's not including his win money, his show money for any jiu-jitsu competitions. Wow, so the man's making money. He's choosing to stay hungry. That is a choice. So if Anthony Joshua wants to make the excuse that it's too successful, that's bullshit. That's an option. You have a choice to continue to stay hungry or not.
So Chael Sonnen said it best. I don't know if you saw this. It was the moment that I changed my mind on Chael Sonnen. When he was a coach on the Ultimate Fighter, he had heard a number of people say, losing's not an option, losing's not an option. Do you remember him on this speech?
I mean, isn't that the speech where he says that's ridiculous because losing is the most readily available option?
That's exactly it. Losing is the most readily available option at all times. Losing is a choice. Now, I understand what he's saying by that. Obviously, sometimes losing isn't a choice, but if you haven't chosen to lose, if you don't give up, then you've won by virtue of the fact that you've learned. So I think that's where he's taking it, but yeah.
my original like coach, the first real like not instructor but like coach. Like when I was on the team, I already had my instructor, but I had this coach just specifically for martial arts competition. He told me there's only one reason that you're allowed to lose. He said that one reason you shouldn't lose. Sorry. He said there's only one reason that you should never lose a fight. He goes, you could lose a fight because you're sick. You could lose a fight because you're injured. You could lose a fight because the guy's better than you. You could lose a fight because you got knocked out. There's a million reasons that you could lose a fight. He goes, the only reason that you should never lose a fight is your cardio, because it's the only thing that is actually in your control. Everything else is out of your control. But whether or not you're getting tired, that's directly in your control.
Completely.
So that's something that always stuck with me when it comes down to winning and losing. It's like there's only really one reason that you should never lose. Like, because you can control that 100%.
How many times have you heard that, Andrew?
Dozens and dozens to every new fighter that shows up.
That is absolutely right. So this one's not so much a discussion as it is just an update. So Adios Yerbasanuli was the Kazakh fighter who a couple of weeks ago was put into an induced coma after his fight. I just wanted to bring it out. We talked about him last in the 5th episode, or the 4th episode rather. I just wanted to give that update that he, as of last Wednesday, is up and speaking, and his prognosis is good.
Awesome.
So for anybody who was listening last time, the Kazakh fighter Adios Yerbasanuli is up and about and out of the coma, speaking, interacting with people, looking like he's going to recover fully.
That's amazing. I love to hear that, man.
So this is an interesting one. We left this on here specifically for you because it has to do with like he's a bit of the opinions on Jake Paul, or he's a fraud, he's doing damage to the sport, and others are like, no, he might be a fraud, but he's bringing eyes to the sport, so it's a good thing. Where do you fall on the Jake Paul phenomenon?
I think that they're doing what a lot of fighters wish they could do, and it pisses them off. Like when it comes down to the fact that they're able to get like the top cream of the crop fighters to fight. Like for instance, I mean, didn't Logan Paul fight Mayweather?
Yeah.
You know how many people, how many legitimate boxers want that so bad, but they couldn't do it? It's what they're doing is they're blaming the Paul brothers for them figuring it out when they themselves haven't figured it out. Boxing is a stepping stone. If you think that fighting is your career, you are wrong. 100% incorrect. At all, period. It is a stepping stone to use to get you to the next level. Do we know Mike Tyson as the boxer right now, or do we know Mike Tyson as the guy who runs Tyson Ranch? Do we know Mike Tyson as the guy who was on the Hangover movies? Do we know Mike Tyson, the actor? Mike Tyson, the guy who was on stage doing his one-man show, which is amazing, by the way, if no one's ever seen it.
We've seen it. It's fantastic.
The guy who literally has one of the most popular podcasts out there. That's the Mike Tyson the new generation knows. They only hear about him being a boxer. They only see clips about him being a boxer because you can only box for so long. Now think about Buster Douglas. What's he up to right now?
Not much of anything.
No one has a clue. Why? Because he thought boxing was his career, and Mike Tyson knew it was a stepping stone. He took it and was like, all right, I'll get this much fame for this much time, and then I have to find something else to do. What about George Foreman? Still very successful, still doing commentary, still in the limelight. Why? Because he knew that was not going to be his entire career. You have to find an exit strategy out of almost anything you do, especially fighting. The Paul brothers just did it backwards.
Right.
They found the audience and people to care about them, even though they weren't boxers. And then they brought that audience over into boxing, and then they became boxers. If they are not boxers tomorrow, do you know how much they will care? None. They will move on, find new money, find new success, because they have figured out that it's not about what you do, but how you do it. Fighters get it.
Do you know who else is Jake Paul and nobody has talked about it? Ryan Garcia. Same thing. he has used his social media platform and his social media success to equate boxing success. He would never have gotten the deal that he got from Golden Boy Productions if he didn't have 5 million followers on Instagram.
Well, I mean, I think that's it. Obviously we're in a digital age. People are starting to use social media, obviously myself included, in order to amass a following and to be able to use that as a tool. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know Ryan Garcia as being anything other than a boxer. Whereas
no, he's not. I only equate the two where he has been savvy with he's in my estimation, just thinking off the top of my head, he's been the most successful gaining that popularity before really his boxing career deserves that kind of attention.
I can see that. And I mean, like, I think that a lot of fighters just don't understand that there's a timeline. It will end. You will no longer be able to fight. And so they think that if they can become a world champion, that's it. Buster Douglas is probably one of the great examples of you could be a world champion and no one can know your name. Like, you're a world champion. Congratulations. How long did that last? How many UFC fighters have had titles and then they just disappeared? Right? I mean, it's a little different because UFC is a little more compact in terms of timeline, how long it's been around. But I mean, there are boxers no one's ever heard of. And and again, we just talked about Willie Pep. I can't tell you how many people don't know that guy ever even existed till I showed him. Right? That guy to me is like a legend. Right? But I just find it sad that so many fighters are trying to like down them when they're giving them the blueprint. They're literally saying, here's how to be successful. Here's how to make money. We're giving it to you. And they're ignoring that because they're going, they're not real boxers. You're a moron. At the end of the day, if you're not looking and paying attention to more than just the sport, you are missing out. And then on top of that, you cannot tell me that they don't have a work ethic.
Absolutely they do.
And so, like, I don't know. It frustrates me a little bit to see that. And I'll bring it back. There are so many people in combat sports that down the casual, that make fun of the casual. Casual is even a term in our industry now because fighters hate the casual. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you hate the casual? They're paying your bills, stupid. Every time you make fun of these people who don't know how to fight, that's one less person that wants to watch you fight. So when these Paul brothers get on there and they bring their audience and they're saying, hey, we want our guys to see us. We don't care if you know how to box. We're just figuring it out ourselves. That's an underdog story. They're supposed to lose and they don't. Like, that's crazy to me. And that's all because they're seeing the bigger picture here. If the Paul brothers lost tomorrow, they would cry their way to their Bentley, to their mansion. God, oh no, I lost. I got knocked out. I was supposed to anyway, but I guess I still made millions of dollars. They don't care. Most fighters don't want to be champions. Most fighters want to be rich.
That's true. That's very true. Very, very true. So let's move on to, there you go, buddy. Let's move on to some Reddit Q&A. This will be interesting.
All right, we're going to have to do this rapid fire.
Yep. So the first one from Maimonides is Daddy. It's a longer post than this, but basically it comes down to how do I take advantage of reach. This young fellow wrote saying he's long, he's lanky, he has the reach, he has a reasonable jab, but every time he starts to fight, he
finds himself on the ropes a lot and
finds himself in the ropes. There you go. You get the question in front of you.
Well, I mean, how I always heard it is like it's called the square circle for a reason, man. So like it sounds like to me it's a footwork issue, not a reach issue. You have the reach, but you're not utilizing the fact that you can move laterally. So it sounds like you're moving too much backwards and not enough left and right to take advantage of the reach. What I talked about earlier might help. Maybe play with it. It might be early in your game. I don't know anything about this person, so I'm just giving some random advice here, right?
Yeah.
My advice, start working on pivoting a lot more. That might help you out a ton. Start working on moving a lot more laterally. Stop moving so much forward and back. There's only so much room in a boxing ring. Usually, depending on if you have that much reach, chances are good you're probably about 2 or 3 steps to the ropes. So if you're 2 to 3 steps to the ropes, you should probably start working on, okay, 1-step pivot turn. Don't just keep yourself backing up. The other thing might be, like I always learned it like this. Short guys want to be like tennis. Short guys want to be close to the net. Tall guys want to be far away from the net, but you never want to stand in the middle of the court. So if you're that long, that sounds like you need to be at the back of the net. So make sure that you're taking advantage of that. And you can really disguise your movement behind your jab. I mean, as that jab goes out, it's very difficult to see through a glove. So whether you're going left or right, when I'm getting punched in the face, I don't know because there's a glove in my face. So utilize your jab to help disguise your movement, and chances are good you'll have a lot more space to move.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to add a couple things. Do you have something there for it there, Andrew?
Yeah, I was going to say focus on the Cuban footwork drill. That would be a really good drill for that.
Well, because you're a tall fighter, 147, 6'1".
Yeah.
He utilizes jab a lot. So I like to said about it's a footwork problem. It is. So for, what is it, Maimonides' is daddy? Listen to this and don't forget this. Anytime you're in the ring, you only have 2 steps backwards. The first one is your initial response. That's your defense. You use your feet to get yourself out of danger. The second one is, pardon my language, I like to call it the oh shit step. Boom, he's still coming at you heavy. Take 1 more step back. Once you've taken 2 steps back, you better move laterally because the ropes are always 3 steps away. So that's the first one. And the second one's going to add on to what you said about your jab interrupting and you're being able to disguise movement with your jab is fire that jab. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be coming forward to hit with your jab. All you're doing is every fighter has a loop. I see something. I recognize something. I go through my Rolodex. How am I going to deal with it? Then I am able to deal with it, and then it rolls around again. So you've always got this thought process going. See, recognize, react. See, recognize, react. Every time you throw a jab out, no matter where you're moving, every time you throw it out, you're interrupting that circle, and you make him reset. He interrupts it. He's going to react. Now something else has happened. Now he's got to go see, recognize, react again. You interrupt that, and that slows his approach down while you're able to jab your way away. But you got to move laterally. Next one there, Andrew. How to find a good coach and trainer. This is a big one, and I think this is a good one for you to talk to there, Rob, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Finding a good coach and trainer is just as simple as is that coach and trainer trying to help you reach your personal goals. Everyone has a different goal. Some people are trying to lose weight. That's all they want to do. They don't want to fight. So if you tell your coach, hey, I want to lose weight, and that coach is throwing you into a ring to make you fight all the time when you don't want to, it's not a good coach for you. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad coach. That just means that's not the coach for you because they're not trying to help you reach your personal goals. So it always boils down to, hey, this is what I want. Can you provide that for me? And then give it a time to say, hey, I'm going to give you X amount of classes. Most places provide you with at least a free trial, if not a paid trial, and then go do the class and see if during that class, how are they treating everyone else but you? When you go to a free trial class or a trial class, they are always going to try to cater to every need that you have because it's your first day. They want to make a good impression. Don't pay attention to that. That's going to be a dime a dozen. How are they treating everyone else? Is it clear that those other people are still having a good time? Is it clear that those people are having different goals and needs met? Or is everybody very cookie cutter? So that's what I would suggest. Go take the trial class, no matter if it's free or paid, and then pay attention outside of your own bubble and see how everyone else is doing.
Right. So I just have one thing to add on to that because I hear it a lot, especially in the forums, is people are always saying, check and see what his fight record was. Check and see what his fight record was. I'll tell you this, that shouldn't be part. Now, it can add to why you think somebody's a good coach, but I don't think it should be one of your main metrics. There are Customato, never fought. Teddy Atlas, never fought pro.
John Donna here, jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely. Lombardi, one of the most famous football coach of all time, never played football. So you don't necessarily have to have been a fighter to be able to train fighters. And good fighters are not always good coaches. So you're definitely going to have to see what kind of fighters they turn out. Is that what you're looking for? More on what you're saying, does this meet my needs? Want to go to the next one there, buddy?
Yep.
We've got a couple here. So this one is how to deal with anxiety before a fight and before sparring. So I put 2 together. This is from Impressionfun2050 and Creamy is Meme, because one is talking about before sparring, one's talking before a fight.
Man, well, those are night and day different issues, to be honest. I mean, when you're sparring, if you're having major anxiety before sparring, I would look into why you're having anxiety before sparring. Sparring should be fun. Like if you're in a training camp, that's different. Like there's a big difference between being a fighter in a training camp and your sparring sessions are about to be hard, or going to spar because you're just there. It's a Tuesday. You're hanging out, moving around with people. That should be fun. So if you're having anxiety before doing that, that means you need to pace it down. Like go slow. Even one-step sparring. Say, hey man, is it okay if like you just throw jabs at me and I'm just going to work on my head movement? Like it's okay to request drills to make sure that you can get to a mindset where you're comfortable. Like, but dealing with anxiety before a fight, there are a million different ways to do that. I wish that I could give you the number one answer, but there isn't one. I mean, the certain fighters used to, before fights, be in a room completely silent, wouldn't talk to anyone. All they would do is just be silent, and that was what they needed. I wasn't that kind of fighter. I was somebody who needed my music. I'm not good at talking to people that the day of. I know that about myself. It took me time to figure that out. But if I have my music, it calms me. It just it puts me in a zone where now I'm not getting ready to fight. I'm going to get in the ring and dance. This is just another day for me. But without that music, I feel like I'm going to crumble. And I even know a guy who used to sleep before fights. He'd be dead asleep, and they'd wake him up like just enough time to get him warm. Barely to get him warm, and he'd go in there, usually bone dry, and he would just murder. Like that was what he needed. He didn't need the heavy warm up. What he needed was the rest to get his mind right. So everybody's different. My suggestion, play with it. Play with different things, right? Write down a list of things that you want to try to do and how you felt. And like, again, everybody's different on how they handle anxiety too. Do you have to go to the bathroom? That's very common. It's okay if that's what you need to do. Do you have to throw up? Also extremely common. Do you feel nauseous at all? Do you feel calm? Do you not get anxious, which is also a problem? You need the adrenaline dump to eventually hit you. It's a matter of when does it hit you. If your adrenaline dump is hitting you 30 minutes before your fight, that's a problem. You need your adrenaline dump to hit you right about the walkout. And you're good. Get the nerves out. Feels good. Oh, fuck, I'm a little nervous. All right, bell rings, calm. Zen.
It always took me until I got hit the first time before I was calm. Once I got hit, I'm like, oh, right, I'm in a fight. Then it's good.
There is no cookie cutter answer, to be honest. But sparring specifically, that's different. I don't think that you should feel as anxious sparring. If you are, all that means is you have to remember that you're in a learning environment. Tone it down. Figure out a way to tone it down. If you're not ready to spar hard, don't do that. If you're in an area, like it's okay to say no to your coach. That's all I'm saying. If don't ever put yourself in a situation where you feel like you're nervous because you're scared. If you're nervous just because you're nervous, talk to your coach, and your coach will give you the answer that you need.
So I would add to that and say, you're 100% correct about before a fight. I'm only going to my answer is only going to apply to one specific reason for anxiety before a fight, because I find that it's the most common. There's a lot of it. Everybody's got different reasons. But the one that I see most often with fighters, not usually from my club because this is something that I concentrate very, very heavily on, is you haven't been brought along slowly enough in sparring. And sparring is anxiety driven for you because they've taken you too quickly, whether they got you in the ring too soon, or they got you sparring hard too soon, or you didn't drill what they were asking you to beforehand and you're just going in there for conditional sparring. Whatever you're doing in there is too much for you, and you know it. And the next time it makes you anxious. Well, I don't want to feel like that again, so I'm anxious. The fight is now amplified. If you feel like that before sparring, that's going to be amplified 10 times by the time you get to the ring. You need to feel comfortable in the ring. Once you feel comfortable in the ring sparring, at least that manifestation of anxiety should, for the most part, disappear. Not all anxiety will. Like you say, there is a healthy anxiety that you need as a fighter, and that's not ever going to go. Whether you feel it on the front end or on the back end, I always felt it in the front end. Andrew does it when he gets in the ring, which is weird to me.
Must be nice. You suck.
Right?
Like my nerves always come late.
Sorry, go ahead.
My nerves usually happen the week before the fight, and they slowly go away by the time the fight gets there. So like my first fight, I walked in like I've done this 100 times. I didn't have a single bit of nerve. It just felt like a Tuesday.
Yeah,
which is good. That's awesome. Most people don't get that, so enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because I felt like a week before, I felt like I'm the king. Like nobody can beat me. And the closer I got to it, the more nervous I got until I got punched for the first time. Like, oh, okay, I'm good now.
Mine always went away when I heard the bell. Like
Oh, yeah?
everything, I felt like I was falling apart. Like from the time my hands were getting wrapped to the time I was walking up to the time I was looking across the ring, talking to myself in my head about all the reasons this is going to go wrong. And then all of a sudden the bell rings and that just goes away.
Yeah.
It just calm, zen. It was like yoga for me once the bell rang. I'm like, all right, well, I guess we're fighting now. Nothing I can do about it. Let's go.
So you got to find your own rhythm. Every fighter has their own rhythm. One good thing that almost any fighter can use is positive reinforcement, positive visualization, so that you're visualizing what's going to happen in the ring, so that nothing that happens in there is going to be a surprise to you.
And a hard training camp helps too.
Oh,
If your
and a
training
hard
camp is really bad, the fight has nothing on your training camp. You're like, well, really, my mindset would be, well, at least it's not the training camp.
Well, you're right. That's,
Exactly.
I say that to guys all the time. If the hardest thing you do is the fight, that's not the way it should go. The what you should face, the obstacles that you should face should be, everything should be harder in the gym than you're going to face in the ring. Then the ring's easy.
All right, last question.
So you got one last question, and it's going to be super easy. How do I know when my stamina is good enough for my first fight? By Friedcheeze. Listen to your coach.
Great, man, how do you know if your stamina is good enough for your first fight? I mean, there's so many different answers for this. Like,
I say the answer is listen to your coach. When he tells you you're ready, you're ready.
I mean, that was where I was going to go, but I felt like it was kind of a cookie cutter answer. I just
But
wanted
it's
someone.
the
the
right
only answer.
I
People
mean,
who
like,
haven't
let's
fought before
for
don't know
instance
what
say,
they
like,
don't know.
You know, let's say for instance, like, for one of the things I've seen is guys who come out of garages, right? They have a coach or they have no coach and they decide they want to fight.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. I'm saying that there are people out there who do that. Not the best way to do it. I think that if you're going to fight, you should have a coach who knows what they're doing. If, let's say, hypothetically, you're that guy who doesn't have anybody else telling you what to do, I think you should judge it based off of how many hard rounds you can go on your bag before you start to poop out. But you also have to have that moment where, are you sparring? Well, again, if you're not sparring, you probably shouldn't fight. So how do you feel when you're sparring? So if your sparring rounds are, let's say you're going and you're going to do an amateur bout of 3 2-minute rounds, right? Then that means that when you're fighting, you should be able to do at least 6 3-minute rounds sparring. So like double it. So whatever you're doing sparring, double that. If you can do that sparring, you can do half of that fighting.
So I have heard. I had a really good bit of advice from one of my coaching mentors, Jill Perry from Ottawa, and what she said, because I used to think the exact same. That's exactly the answer I gave to everybody. If you can do, all you need to do is 3. So if you can do 10, you know you can do 3. She heard me say that and said that doesn't make any sense. If you're fighting 10 3-minute rounds, you're fighting a 10-round pace. Amateurs 3 rounds. It's balls to the wall for 3 rounds. So now my answer is I only get my guys to spar 4 rounds, because any more than that and they're gonna slow the pace that they work at, and for amateur that doesn't work. When you're sparring, if you've got 3 rounds 2 minutes to work, if you are sparring 3 rounds 2 minutes in the gym and you're tired at all, because fighting is at least double as hard as sparring. If you're tired during 3 rounds, you better get at it, because nothing in sparring should be as tiring as an actual fight.
For sure. I think that's solid advice, man. I like it.
All right. Well, that was a fantastic, what was it, hour and 23. We're just
Hour
gonna pop this up
21.
on here. Hour 21?
I have a timer
That's
going.
right. So for anybody watching, hit the subscribe, like, and follow. Look up McDojoLife on Instagram, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Definitely do yourself a favor and look it up. It is humorous. I almost feel guilty for saying it's humorous, because it is an important thing to make yourself aware of. But definitely watch it. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for the hour there, Rob.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for the business advice last weekend. And definitely from all fighters, we'd like to say to you, thank you very much for your channel. We appreciate it.
I appreciate the support, man. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The champ is here!